Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So for those of you who are just joining us, we've been looking at a text. It's called the Book of Assistance by Imam Al-Haddad, rahimahullah. People want to pull it up on their phones or anything that you have. You just Google the Book of Assistance PDF and it'll pop up. Last week we were looking at the 11th chapter on doctrine. We got into a discussion on what Aqidah is, how it's different from Iman, why it's necessary to study kind of a codified system of creed. People remember from last week? Yeah. I'm like half asleep, by the way, just so everybody knows. And so we're going to move into the 12th chapter that is on religious obligations and jump right into it before we kind of do a little bit more of a debrief and a discussion. So people have the text open. We're on the 12th chapter on religious obligations. Can someone start reading it off for us? You must observe the obligations and the prohibitions. Keep going. You read the next paragraph.
See, may God have mercy on you. What this hadith Qudsi, holy tradition contains of secret and noses, and ponder on the fine meanings and subtleties of which it indicates. This fortunate servant only reaches that great rank where everything he likes is liked by God, and everything he dislikes is disliked by him, by virtue of his conforming to what he has made obligatory upon him, and his performing supererogatory devotions in abundance, which in his wish to draw nearer to him. So make haste if you are determined to reach the degrees of perfection, and wish to attain to the ranks of men. The path is now clear before you, and the radiance of realization has appeared to you.
Okay. So the text that Imam Al-Haddad is counting for here gives us a particular indication not on the performance of religious obligation or recommended actions, what he calls supererogatory. So we have like the fara'id, what are obligatory upon you. You have what is sunnah, mustahab, and these are two like different terms. They're not necessarily interchangeable in the ways that we might think about them, because there are emphatically emphasized prophetic practices, the sunnah mu'akkada, and there are things that are recommended to be done. And those are not necessarily the same. the obligations are distinct from those. And then you have things that are just even extra upon that, like the nafilah. And here, Imam Al-Haddad is giving us a principle that is important to understand, because for a lot of us, whether we're born into Islam, we convert to Islam, we learn the terms fard and haram before we quite often are taught to celebrate Allah in our lives. And even when you're given the term fard or you're given the term haram, it's not necessarily given in anything beyond a vacuum in terms of what is the point of the exercise in and of itself. What's the yield from it? Right? So if you went to somebody who gave you physical exercise and said, if you do X, it will impact Y. Right? Here is the exercise and here is the result of the exercise. You walk up and down stairs, it's going to give you a different benefit than if you run on an elliptical machine. If you bench press, it's going to be different than if you squat, right? Do people understand what I'm saying? Right? You could play basketball and it's very different than if you play, another sport, right? Swimming gives you like a different yield, right? You could play field hockey. You could play badminton. I was trying to tell my kids today, it's my son's birthday, so we took him bowling earlier today, and my daughter, was trying to convince me she's the best bowler in the world. So I said, you can be a professional bowler. And I started showing her pictures of professional bowlers. And I don't know if anyone has ever watched professional bowling on television before. Has anybody ever done that before? Yeah. You did? Yeah. Why did you do that? Just for fun? It's on ESPN, right? Yeah. So you just turn on ESPN and sometimes there's random bowling championships. You can win 80 bowling championships in a year, it's a crazy stat that they have. But they're also exercise. It's considered a sport in some capacity. They're different yields through the different sports. You do certain things that'll make you jump higher. You do certain things that'll make your arms stronger. You do certain things that'll make your legs faster. Of the gains, you don't want to always think in absolutes, but of the potential gains of these spiritual exercises, the performance of the religious obligations, and beyond the obligations, the supererogatory obligations, the yield from the exercise is love. And that love is channeled to a proximity to the divine. Why is this an important value in Islam? Right? Because I think we talked about it here a few weeks ago, or maybe at Jum'ah at some point or another, it's come up. But undeniably, love is a very important part of Islam as a tradition. It's in numerous hadith. The Prophet ﷺ constructs in this way, لن تدخل الجنة حتى تؤمنوا ولن تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا. You will not enter paradise until you believe. You will not believe until you love one another. The verb is reflexive, so you love each other, right? And then he gives a mechanism to increase love. Shall I not tell you a way to increase love? Spread salam amongst yourselves, right? So you greet people, the ones you know you don't know. You give them greetings of peace. It's a mechanism of increasing love. لا يؤمن أحدكم, that not one of you will believe. You won't have iman حتى يحب, until you love لأخيه, for your brother, ما يحب, what you love لنفسه, for yourself. It doesn't mean that you absolutely don't have iman, but the iman is not complete. A man comes to the Prophet ﷺ and says that I haven't really done so much in terms of prayers and these ritual acts, etc. But I love Allah and His Messenger. And it's in the context of preparing for the Day of Judgment, the last hour, right? So tell me of the hour. What have you prepared for it? I haven't done so much in terms of prayers and these, rituals, but I love Allah and His Messenger. And the Prophet ﷺ's response, Al-maru ma'a man ahab, that a person will be with the one that they love. Why is this an important value? It could have been anything. But here, the yield through the acts that you have to think about primarily first in the context of the introduction of the act to you, right? The ritual is not an ends, it's a means to something. And if it's done in the way that it's intended to be done, that it increases in this thing of mahabba. And you want to pair this with the previous chapter. It's a roadmap to a destination. So you think, why is creed spoken about and then this chapter is spoken about? Creed can be rotely memorized. We can go to the Department of Islamic Studies at NYU, and there's tons of professors who know Islamic creed inside and out more than any Muslim knows it. This is a distinction between Iman and creed, to have faith versus just rotely memorized, codified creed. It's trickling down now into a recognition still that this is giving an important insight on who the divine is also. Allah, for example, is described to us in the Quran as Qareeb. He's close. He's not described as being Ba'id, far away. So where does the distance come in? And the creedal aspect is important because within the distinctions of some of these creedal schools, the Ashari, Maturidi, Athari schools, these are the kind of questions that come up, right? That if you take sometimes a methodology that is just rooted in what is said and that's it, and it's reductive, and you would ask somebody, well, where is God? And somebody says, God is above us in the heavens. You've now negated certain essential understandings of the divine, that you have limited spatially the divine in a capacity. If Allah is confined to a certain realm of existence, that creates like a certain challenge. Does that make sense? So that's not what we're talking about here in terms of proximity, closeness, and distance. Because the tradition is really clear. Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein. So that variable of love, it plays a transformative role in the practitioner of the ritual. You can't compel God. He is Ghani. Why is love important? And to understand this too, you have to have a baseline definition. We're not talking about romantic love. That's not every form of love. When I tell you I love you, it doesn't mean that I'm in love with you. The person I'm in love with is sitting upstairs with my kids right now. Sorry about that. It's not any of you. Doesn't mean I don't love you, but I'm in love with her. I'm not in love with you. So all forms of love are not romantic love or physical love or erotic love. These are not all of the forms of love. There's a lot of different types of love that exists. Why is love important here? Why is it important for us to understand that it's also attached to these daily prayers that we pray, these fara'id that we engage on a regular basis, these rituals, these practice, of the consequence of them is through their performance, this thing of mahabba, this thing of love. Why is that an important thing to reflect upon and understand? And why would in his divine wisdom Allah give us this as opposed to, why not patience? Why not tawakkul? Reliance and trust. Do you get what I'm saying? So you can turn to the person next to you and talk this out a little bit. What does love do for you? Individually, you don't have to speak about it subjectively, but even if you were to think about it conceptually, what is this thing of love? Why would it be such an important thing to yield? And that it's embedded within these practices in these ways as a mechanism that you can harness it more and increase in it through the performance of these things. Why? Why is that something that I would want to have? Why would I be motivated to do this? Because that's for me the gain, right? Let's assume I already know this the way I know that, like, it's hard to wake up and run every day. It's hard to get up and go and do this and go and do that. You know, I already know why I kill myself working potentially to gain at the end of it the money that's provided to me from the performance of a job, right? That's what we do in certain ways. Here, I have to incentivize for myself now. This is what I'm being told is this thing, but if I've never thought about what the gain is from it, then I'm not going to necessarily chase after it, or yearn for it, or want it. Do you get what I mean? Then the prayer is going to be a headache. Then the fast is going to be a burden. Then zakat isn't going to be something that I even bother to understand its rules. Then fiqh is just something that is a list of to-dos and not to-dos, as opposed to actually a spiritual exercise in and of itself. Do you get what I mean? So if you can turn to the persons next to you, if you don't know their names already, learn each other's names. Why? Why love? Like, what can it do for a person? This thing of love, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we're discussing? Why this? Like, what's the importance of it? Why is that something that you're built for? Right? Allah's given us an entry bar into this religion that's not very high. You know, you don't have to come in up here. It's like pretty easy to be Muslim in the sense of, like, people might make it hard, but it's really not that much that is necessary to do as such. And then embedded within these are yields of these kinds. And so here is the yield. Why is this an important yield? The consequence of the performance of these things is the increase in love. Like, what's going on there? What did you just talk about? Yeah.
I think like we were talking about like love is like the motivation of everybody's motivation to do something. So like you said, like if you do prayers and rewards and all these rituals about love, it's like you're kind of like disconnecting yourself like from Allah, and like you want to like do that because like if our purpose is to like try to build a better relationship with Allah, the only way to do that is like through love, because like I remember somewhere in the scripture it says like Allah loves you 70 times more than your own mother, and that's like you can't even imagine. So I think like in order to like feel that kind of like I guess love, and it just feels nice. Like without love, there's no it's just like it's depression, lack of motivation.
Okay, good, right? So statistically, when someone loves or is loved, it lessens things like depression and anxiety and grief, right? The presence of this renders now a feeling of goodness, which also means is the absence of the opposite of that, right? And think about what you can do when you have energy versus when you don't have energy. You know, think about when the world feels super heavy versus when the world feels really light, right? What else? What else comes up for people? Yeah.
So I guess what we discussed was how evaluating people's difficulty in relationship. You of course were present in the prayers, you of course speak for the podcast, you start loving them, like the practices of love. Next time you're gonna go out an extra mile. Next time turn to the snowball effect where you starting with just the obligatory prayers. And then like I'm gonna do this time, I'm going here, I'm just like learn more and more. And it's like one of the most powerful motivators for you to get into a deeper fostering a deeper relationship.
Yeah, it can give you motivation to do more, which then assumes what, right? Like, doing more is a very kind of ambiguous, broad term, because everybody does stuff. Do you know what I mean? Right? You spend your whole day doing something, you know? But you're qualifying what you're doing now through a certain prism. What are the kind of things that it could bring you to do, for example? Like, what are some things, if you were to name specifics or kind of nuance it a bit, right? So it's not so broad. We want to make it tangible so that you actually want to go out and get it done. Do you get what I mean? The whole idea is to not have an exercise that is rooted just in rhetoric, and then there's not anything that kind of clicks inside, right? Because if I really am going to buy into what it is that can only be yielded through the performance of some of these things, I have to bring it to a place of recognition personally. Like, why is this something that I need? Because there's nothing without meaning in God's plan, And so the way Allah built you and then gave you the prescriptions to be able to replenish in certain things, why is this something that you need for replenishment? And the kind of things that it's going to bring you to do. What are those kinds of things that it's going to bring you to do? What is it going to inculcate within you as a sense of kind of focus and impacting exertion? Do you get what I mean? Right? Because I could go out there and do a bunch of things, and in doing those things, I could be a jerk, you know? If I'm sitting and just scrolling on my phone, I'm still doing something, right? So we have to kind of bring it to a more specific place, right? What else do we talk about? What else came up? Yeah.
I think to add on to that, I think about the concept of like a spiritual heart, and when you love what Allah loves for you, then you begin to act in ways that represent a purified heart as opposed to a corrupted one. When you do things that Allah does not love for you, and so that manifesting in areas of like charity or prayer or things of that nature. So,
Yeah, you think about the challenge that people have, right? Why are we looking at this text as a means to gain what it's about, which is what? Spiritual increase. Why is that important in the part of the world that we're in? Well, people don't come here for enlightenment, do they? No, right? Like a lot of you people have family members, just like my family. They came this way, some of them against their own will. Some of them contemporarily came in the last however many decades in pursuit of materialistic gain and wealth. When people want enlightenment, they don't go west, they go east. Right? Yes or no? So the challenge that exists quite deeply in the part of the world that we're in, especially in the city that we live in, that's great. I don't think I would live anywhere else other than New York City. But a hallmark characteristic of this part of the world, the generalization we can make, is that it's stricken with a spiritual poverty. This is where people are poor, spiritually. The yield from that spiritual poverty becomes a lot of different things. People are not valued. Wealth is more valued. We value profits over people. That's why people can make all kinds of disgusting decisions, not caring what it's going to do to another human life, right? May Allah never make us amongst those. Characteristics that now become ever present, symptomatic of the spiritual poverty: indifference, uncaring, an absence of compassion. Individuals just sway in whatever direction the winds of privileged folks blow them in. And you get to a place where every single day, basic humanity is just dying again and again and again. It's a spiritual poverty. That's where people are super poor. That's why in our tradition, there's not necessarily a notion theologically. This is why creed is important to understand, because we don't have a creedal system that tells us that God's favor upon you is rooted in how much of the world He has given to you. This prosperity doctrine is not an Islamic doctrine. It exists within certain denominations of Christianity. It's a very racist doctrine that you can have a bunch of white people that can tell black people that, well, what can we do? The sign that God loves us is that He gave us so much wealth and authority and power. If He loved you, He would have given it to you too. That's not how Islamic doctrine works. That's not how Islamic theology. Your prophet chose to have a life of poverty in the physical sense of it. But in terms of spirituality, he was the richest of people, right? Tanama anaya wa la yanama qalbi. When he's asked about even his sleep, my eyes they sleep, but my heart does not sleep. When he tells us in the hadith, ليس الغنى عن كثرة العرض ولكن الغنى غنى النفس, that true richness is not having an abundance of things of the earth, but true richness is having a richness of your soul. This is why you got to understand why love is important, because it's a key ingredient to breaking out of spiritual poverty. So I don't have to become subservient to the world. I'm in a place where I have a different sense of motivation and compulsion in getting things done that I need to be able to get done. So the prayer feels a little bit sweeter. It's not as hard to give in charity. I wish I had more. This is why the hadith says, أفضل ذكر لا إله إلا الله وأفضل الدعاء الحمد لله, that the best of remembrance is saying La ilaha illallah. There's nothing worthy of worship except Allah. And the best dua is saying Alhamdulillah, that all praise and thanks is to Allah. And what we're taught is that this word Alhamdulillah can actually be a dua, because the motivation that you're bringing to its utterance is such that you're thanking and praising God for everything He's given to you. You're saying, Ya Allah, give me more so I can continue to thank you and praise you more for it. The act of charity doesn't become hard then, and it's still rooted in love, because you love for your brother what you love for yourself. So you want people to have security the way you do. You want people to have comfort the way you do. You want people to have air conditioning and electricity and couches and all kinds of things the way that you do, because love becomes an important factor. So what else can love do? When you really are motivated by love, it makes sacrifice a little bit easier. I want you to have it, even if that means that I have to give up a little bit of what I have. Where does spiritual poverty come in? Nobody is going to say that oppression is okay, right? Right? Are you laughing? Yeah? Do you think oppression is okay? Are you sure? It's a safe space, man. You can tell us if you want to. Yeah? Nobody's going to say that it's okay. But when you get down to it, and you think about what you have to give up so that somebody else is not held down, are you going to do it? Are you going to acknowledge the benefits that are yielded from systems and structures that hold others down, that give you just a little bit of what others who exist in definitive privileged demographics have just thrown at you, so that you pretend like it doesn't happen to those other people? Right? We got to give definitions to words. Sacrifice isn't, I just gave up something. Sacrifice isn't, oh man, I'm not going to have a chair to sit in anymore. I'm not going to have a laptop. It's too simplistic. Sacrifice is about letting go of something now for something that you will gain better in the future. And when you understand that you are a created being, but you are created for eternal existence, may Allah make us people of Jannah, then the giving up of something now, even in the sense of being better in this world, is not even limited to this world. It is there in terms of what is eternal existence. Do you see what I mean? Love has the capacity to do this. When I'm in a place where I'm willing to give up sleep for the people I love, I'm willing to change the way I eat for the people I love. I don't know what community I was in some time ago, and they're trying to figure out like different things. I think we were talking to a bunch of like different Muslim organizations. And I said, I've told my community at different times. Maybe some of you heard it, maybe some of you haven't. But I've said, we'll sit down on the floor and eat off of paper plates and have a slice of pizza over having these big banquets and galas all the time, if it means that we're going to be able to give other people something. But the best part is that I don't really hear as many people complain as I do when I go other places. And that's why I love this community and I'm proud of this community, because you're not seeing what it is that sometimes gets given up, but where others might gain and benefit. Do you get what I mean? Love does that. And then at the consequence of it, you get the heart that is able to tell the body, hey, even just give $1. The guy flies all the way from an occupied territory, comes and speaks at Jummah. You've never met him before, talks to you about everything that he's going through. And you dig deep and you throw $1 into a donation box. And then hundreds of people throw a little bit of cash, it's coming from a place of love. It can come from a place that is other than love. It can come from a place that is unhealthy guilt, unhealthy senses of remorse. Then I'm not giving with an understanding that Allah has made me a means to make someone else's life better. I'm giving to make myself feel better. They're two different intentions. Do you understand? Does that make sense? And then you see the connection here. What drives that type of love? You pray your sunnah prayers. You complete the fard prayers. When I come home and I'm exhausted, I'm like exhausted, right? My wife and my kids were away for a week. I'm like so dumb, man. Every night I was in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning. Some of it's not even my fault. Some of it's your fault because I hung out with some of you. And every time I said, I'm going to go home now, you're like, no, let's just do this now. And let's just do that now. And then I didn't get home till after midnight. And I flew to Canada this weekend, came back, and I passed out for an hour before this dars started. And it's my son's birthday. I don't want to be too tired to be happy when I come home and my son hugs me and my daughter hugs me and my wife hugs me because they missed me after not seeing me for a week. It's the same thing when I come home from a long day of work and I still chose to be a father. I still chose to be a husband. When I come back and my kids want to do different things and I'm exhausted, what's going to get me going and to not even think about the tiredness is going to be love. When one of you calls me in the middle of the night, not even with hesitation, I'm going to sit till 1 o'clock in the morning with somebody because it's coming from a place of love. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, our love for him is a part of our iman, and may Allah make us those who give the love that is owed to our messenger. But you have to understand that no matter how much you end up loving the Prophet of God, he's going to always love you more. When you read the prophetic biography, the seerah of a person, it literally doesn't stop for 23 years, just keeps going. It's all rooted in love. Becomes like a base of that energy. Do you get what I mean? Then you don't even sit down and say, you know what I did for you? You know what I gave up for you? Show me a hadith where the Prophet says that to anybody. It's remarkable. When I was in Toronto, what they asked me to speak about was the last days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we won't go into it in too much detail, but if you read just that part of the seerah literature in detail, the Prophet is running on empty. His fever is so much that forget about touching his skin. When they just brought their hand close and touched the turban that he had wrapped on his head, that felt immensely hot because of the heat that his body was protruding. That the hadith says that what he is going through is likened to the ailment of 2 men. Some narrations say up to 10 men's equivalent of just ailment, pain. And in the 2 weeks that he goes through this deep illness, he still leads the prayers for a week and a half. Consistently from the time he knows he's going to die. Ramadan in the last year of his life, the angel Jibreel would typically read the Quran with him and he'd do itikaf for 10 days. And then he'd read the Mus'haf, the Quran, like one complete reading. The last Ramadan, he was there for 20 days, 2 complete readings, already different. The next month, Mu'adh bin Jabal is sent to Yemen. And in the advices that he gives to him and such deep insight, he says to him that, Ya Mu'adh, as they walk to the outskirts of the city, that, oh Mu'adh, when you come back here, you're not gonna find me. And he says to him, Ya Mu'adh, I love you. that indeed I love you, O Mu'adh. He announces to everybody that he's going to go for Hajj. You got to contextualize what this means. Because by that point in time in the existence of Islam, it's not just like persecuted Mecca, but they're in Medina, they've established a community, and a lot of people have become Muslim, and many of them have never seen the Prophet of God in person before. And so the way some of you might go someplace because you know so-and-so is coming to speak here, or this person is performing here, they're doing this. The word was spread out through the Hijaz. The Prophet of God is going to go perform Hajj this year. Jabir ibn Abdullah, who's a companion of the Prophet, radiallahu anh, he says that when they go for Hajj, he looks, and from where the Prophet is standing, all he can see behind the Prophet is people. And when he looks to this side and he looks to that side, all he sees are people and people. And this is where they have that last sermon that many of you are familiar with. And in the context of that, gives a lot of advices. And amongst them, he says, "O people, lend me attentive ear. I might not be here with you after this." He reiterates it again. When this is done, he goes to Uhud and makes dua and essentially says to the shuhada who passed away at the Battle of Uhud, we're going to be together again soon. He takes a emancipated servant by the name of Abu Muwayhiba, and they go to the Baqiyah, the cemetery in Medina. They make the same dua, and while he's there, he says to this man that Allah has presented with me, essentially paraphrased, two options. I can stay in this world, or I can go on to the next world. And Abu Muwayhiba says, stay in this dunya, Ya Rasulullah. Like, don't leave us, O Messenger of God. They have to have two men, as his sickness gets deeper, literally become crutches to him, to carry him back and forth from his home to the masjid. A man by the name of Al-Fadl ibn al-Abbas and Ali ibn Abi Talib. Why is he doing it? If you've ever been with somebody towards the end of their life, if you've ever seen someone in that state of physical duress, may Allah grant all of our loved ones healing and shifa. When you see people in that place, they're being tended to. They're not the ones that are tending to others. The Prophet ﷺ, he's still getting up because he knows that for these people, it's going to mean something different the last time they hear him recite the Quran. The last time they get to pray behind him. The last time they get to see his face. So he's not trying to just sit in a bed every time that he's got to get up and that there's no medicines, right? It's not like he's living in the middle of Manhattan in 2023. In Medina at that time, there's nothing to keep the fever down. There's nothing that he can take as a vaccine. The only thing that keeps the heat down is they just keep pouring water on top of him again and again and again. But the love that he has for his people has him get up and do things that are just miraculous. Do you get what I'm saying? And you might say, is it really that simple? And it's, yeah, you just got to have a paradigm shift. You think about Fajr as something that is a burden versus you think about it as the moment where the two sunnahs of it are worth everything in the world, and the entire world and everything in it is what the hadith says. The equivalent of that is what you yield, and it's attached to this thing of love. You get what I mean? Why else is this important? Because a big block to us being able to love others fully is because a lot of us don't really like ourselves so much. We don't really love ourselves so much, especially in healthy ways. This hadith that says you will not love for your brother what you love for yourself is about loving for others, but it also gives indication that it's okay to love things for yourself. You can love yourself. And these prisms that get in the way, if we bring it all together, Allah is qareeb, He's not ba'id. What is it that's making it hard then to feel the presence of God, closer than your own jugular vein? The obstacles that are coming are not outward, but inward. What makes it hard for me to sometimes have those things? And what becomes the vision modifier and the mechanism for lifting some of those veils, this is what this hadith is saying. That when you perform the obligations, it's going to increase this. It's not going to make the pain change or reality change, but how you see the reality changes. How you deal with sadness, how you deal with stress, how you deal with the difficulty. You want to do it even more? Then these extra ones, that's what they do. When you try to say to someone, what is the point of doing the obligations? What is the point of doing something recommended? One of the worst things that anybody can ever say to somebody is that, oh, it's just sunnah, meaning like it's not a big deal. What are you saying? That I don't want to be increased in that thing of love within me? That I want to be able to love myself enough that I don't want to be somebody's doormat. I don't want somebody to mistreat me. I want to be able to have strength. This is what love does. Me giving love is a source of strength, not a source of diminishing strength. And being loved is a source of courage. It makes you not live without fear, but live in a place where you can acknowledge fear and despite fear still get certain things done. Does this make sense? Yeah? Okay, let's take a quick minute. If you turn to the person next to you, because I know I'm talking a lot, what are you taking away so far? Right? What is it bringing up for you? Let's talk for 2 minutes and then we'll come back. Go ahead. Okay. So, what are some of the things we're taking away so far? What is it bringing up for you? What are you discussing? Who wants to start? Are you raising your hand?
No, I can start. We were just talking about, I did raise my hand, but I think you talked about loving yourself first, which is culturally and traditionally, I think we're always told, especially as women, that, you know, be selfless, give as much as you can. Like, and I think it's very important, and it's a perspective we're not used to, and it's kind of almost uncomfortable because showing up for yourself is almost like a secondary thing, almost for most of us. And so it's a good reminder. And I think once you show up for yourself, whatever goals you set up for yourself, right? I think this class was taken like throughout, like you mentioned, like what does it mean to show up for yourself? Are you sleeping on time? Are you waking up for Fajr? Are you waking up for? If that's what you want for yourself and showing up, you are fully yourself. You're confident in who you are. When you're confident in who you are, that's when you can give the best of yourself to someone else.
Great. What else?
We were talking about
I'll add on to my takeaway was very similar to that. I mean, it is like if you think about the different types of love, like we were talking about parental and then your partner, you know, loving oneself is so important, right? And it takes so many different types of forms. Like, you know, it could just, you know, it's, you know, acts of discipline. It's being the type of person that you want to be. And it is also, like you said, like, your destiny does not need to be predetermined by, you know, whatever it is that some people in power, whatever, have said that, you know, this is what you must do. Like, to love yourself too is to carve out your space in the world, right? And in your relationship with Allah and everything like that. Like, it is a form of self-love that can then spread out to the people around you, right? And then even further into your community and everything like that. But yeah, it does have to start internally.
Go ahead.
So we were talking that when your relation with God starts from a mindset of love, that you love yourself and you love the people around you, it's easier for you to pray, it's easier for you to communicate. On the other side, if you make it just an obligation, just a ritual, a routine that you do, and it comes with like the fear mindset, it will be meaningless. You will be
Yeah, and we keep shifting paradigms, right? So it's not that I'm doing this out of love because Allah asked me to do it, but nuancing it more to say that Allah asked me to do it because of His love for me, right? It becomes hard in jargon that kind of litters the internet of tests and trials and this and that. You just got to try your best. And in a God-centric religion, this is why understanding creed is important. Allah knows best. And that's really important in this way to understand. You don't have to get how it does what it does in order for it to do what it does. Do you get what I'm saying? A lot of people can tell you the consequences of things. They couldn't explain to you the why. A lot of what empirical-based evidence does, it tells you what and how, but it doesn't tell you why quite often. I don't know why your fara'id do this. I don't know how it works. Just like I couldn't tell you why when we pray Maghrib, we're going to pray 3 rak'ahs instead of 4 or 7 or 12 or any other number. You don't have to know why. You're being told, this is the exercise, this is what it gets done for you. Do you see what I mean? And in the same way with other things, you have to determine what is keeping me from getting this done. But it's not a necessary variable to understand how it does what it does in order for it to do what it is that it intends to do. But if you don't do it, then you can't get out of it other than what you're putting into it. And that's not about throwing your back against the wall, being in a state of defense. This isn't about anything other than healthy introspection, right? You're not going to walk into our community and somebody's going to point a finger in your face. Usually, it's a big space. There's a lot of people who can be idiots, and I'm sorry about that. But the norm isn't going to be that somebody's going to come up to you and say, haram, 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 here. So you want to take what's instinctive and innate, because it's really hard in a world that seeks to put you in boxes that you're bigger than, that you always constantly are compared to what the norm is, but you're not the norm. This is what whiteness does. When it claims it's the primordial state, it has you always in a place of comparison. You always have to have a reason why you do something, but there's some people that when they do it, there's no explanation. This is what they're doing. That's just the way that it's okay for it to be done. You're always from someplace else. There's some people, they're just always exactly where they're supposed to be. It builds upon itself. That's not what we're saying to do here, to have unhealthy reflection. That's why all these chapters have to be understood in relation to each other. That's why creed is important, so that you understand who God is, when you can then apply that now to the gifts that God gives to you here. Somebody says, how do you know Allah loves you? He tells you He's Al-Wadud. He's a source of an unconditional love. And that He loves you not just because of who you are, but because of who He is in His essence. This is what perfect love does. It takes us in all of our diversity and embraces us despite our imperfections. It's not God that doesn't love you as a whole individual. Sometimes it's me that doesn't love me. And then I don't, because of the lack of love, feel like I'm the one that's supposed to be getting up to pray Fajr. That's for somebody else who looks a certain way, or dresses a certain way, or does this or does that in certain ways. No, man, that's for you. It's for you more than anybody. And you got to talk to yourself in that way. So it gives you a certain audacious boldness to be able to be in spaces that are rightfully for you to be in. Do you get what I mean? Including when nobody else is around. That it's for you more than anybody to be standing in the middle of the night to pray that prayer when nobody else sees you. It's not for anybody else. Why is it not for you? So the act, we don't have to know how it works, but that's how it does it. I don't know what happens to my body when I eat certain things or don't eat certain things. You don't know what it does to you. We're going to go eat something later on. Some of you might know. Most of you don't know what the water is actually doing. If you really knew what food was doing to your body, you wouldn't eat half of the stuff that you eat, right? And sometimes we make bad decisions in different ways. You know, I do it all the time, right? But in being able to understand that the recognition of it isn't that I have to know to its minute detail. This is something that Allah has put into it. This is why the text describes it in the prism of words like secrets, not because they are things that cannot be known, but they're not necessarily what's most apparent. Somebody's just going to tell you haram, fard, and then that's it. Versus they sit down and they say that this is the mechanism for the increase of love, for proximity to the divine, to be able to remove the veils and obstacles that get in the way. So why Rumi, rahimahullah, he says that your goal is to not go out and seek love to find beauty. Your goal is to merely find all of the obstacles that you have built within yourself that keep you from seeing it. You see what I mean? Let's continue. So this next paragraph, know that God has put much good into supererogatory devotions. Can somebody read it? A loud voice. Public speaking tip. You speak as if you're talking to the person sitting farthest away from you in the room. So can somebody read the next paragraph? Yeah, go ahead.
Know that God has put much good into supererogatory devotion through His grace and mercy, for the imperfections occur in the obligatory worship. However, imperfections in an obligatory act can only be redeemed by an act of supererogation of the same kind, prayer by prayer and fasting by fasting. Obligations are the basis and acts of supererogation and dependent upon them.
Okay, so what does this mean? Right? Like if I have a deficiency in my prayer, then what is going to compensate for the deficiency in my prayer are the extra prayers. Does this make sense? You want to think again, like think just about who Allah and Allah's messenger is telling you who Allah is. There's narrations in the hadith where the angels were taught that the first thing you're going to be questioned about on the day of judgment is your salah, your ritual prayer, your 5 daily prayers. May Allah grant us ease on that day of judgment. It's the first thing. Don't get caught off guard. You're being given the questions. And it's not meant to be something that's clever or kind of just entertaining. Literally, you're being told, this is the first thing you will be asked about, is going to be the state of your salah. That's it. If everything is good in that, then what comes after is good. If everything is not good, then what comes after, not good. When the hadith define this now, the angels go to assess the individual's salah. And they come back to Allah and they say that there is deficiency in their obligatory prayers. They didn't get it done. Allah tells the angels, go back and see if they did anything extra. This is who Ar-Rahman is. You didn't do what was the main foundational act of connection to the divine. And when the angels say you didn't get it done, Allah says to His angels, creatures of obedience, just go and look if there's anything that they did that we can accept it from them. They didn't fulfill the fara'id. See, is there anything else? Go back and look again. Do you get what I mean? I teach classes at NYU. Some of you might have taken some of those classes. Some of you have TA'd for me. I tell my students on the first day of class, it is so hard to not get an A in this class. You have to try to not get an A in this class. It is super difficult to not get an A in my class. And there's still always people at the end of it who I'm like, what are you doing? Like, how is it possible? How? How is it possible? You have a merciful God. He's telling you this is how it's going to line up. What's getting in the way? What are the distractions? What is all of this really about? Don't fall into this understanding that success only is this X, Y, and Z thing. 2 sunnahs of Fajr are worth the entire world and everything in it. You got to tell it to yourself again and again and again. My 10-year-old, tomorrow's my wife's birthday. Today's my son's birthday. He's my brother too. My wife's tomorrow. My daughter, on my way down, as I'm trying to wake up to come down here, she's like, Baba, when we wake up for Fajr tomorrow, it's my 10-year-old, right? She's making plans around what is her Fajr prayer that she already wakes up for, mashallah. She said, why don't you go? This is her thing. She said, we'll go to the supermarket after Fajr and get all these ingredients and make this for Mama at this time. That's great, and I'm proud of her, mashallah. But she already understands something that escapes many of us, that you can build your routine around this thing. You don't have to just try to squeeze it in there. Do you get what I mean? If you've ever met my baby girl, she is like the sweetest of sweet people. She's not cranky or grumpy. She is beautiful. May Allah bless her and increase her. She gets up to pray Fajr, and she prays her sunnahs. That's just it. And at 10, she can say, after Fajr, let's do X, Y, or Z. She's not, let's just jump back into bed. Do you get what I'm saying? I tell my kids, you don't wake up to go to sleep like you wake up to wake up, right? But you can build your routine around it. And even where you're slipping, it's built in here. So why do we want to do some of these other things? You could try to roll the dice and say, like, I'm good at where I'm at. And there's companions, they did this. The Bedouin comes to the Prophet, tell me what this deen is about. He tells them to do what are the 5 pillars of Islam, right? And he says, I'm doing that and nothing else. Then he walks away. You got to think about the nature of this interaction, right? When Bedouins came to talk to the Prophet, it was a little bit different than when the companions who lived in the city with the Prophet, like, talked to the Prophet. The Prophet ﷺ, when the companions are speaking to him, Ya Rasulullah, O Messenger of God, this and that. The Bedouins come in, O Muhammad, tell me this. There's hadith, like literally, Bedouins come in. Their Prophet's given a khutbah on the pulpit, and the man says, teach me something. The Prophet comes down from the pulpit and teaches him something. And then he gets back up and finishes his sermon. I'm not doing anything more than this. Good. You want to do what is that, but then make sure you're actually getting it done. And then understand the nature of this. Your Lord looks for reasons to accept from you, not looks for reasons to push you away. The principle here, unless it's otherwise stated, right? So you fast in Ramadan. At the end of Ramadan, there's the charity, the Zakat al-Fitr. It serves 2 roles. One, to ensure that on the day of Eid, that those who don't have means can also celebrate the holiday, right? We have people that reach out to us all the time. There's 800 families we support through the Zakat Fund of New York City. That's why you got to be on top of your zakat. It's haram wealth for you, your zakat. That belongs to somebody else. Those 8 categories of people, that money is for them. And it's the minimum. These people in need, these other categories. There's people who reach out and they say, my kids grew between last Eid and this Eid, and the outfit I had from my daughter, the older one from last Eid, she's too big to wear it, and the younger one grew bigger than this one was last year. She can't wear it. I don't have any clothes for them to wear on the holiday and want them to enjoy it. It's the point of Zakat al-Fitr. People can enjoy the holiday all together. And it's also a means of expiation for deficiencies in your Ramadan. But the nature of it, why you want to fast Mondays and Thursdays, why you want to fast the middle days, the white days of the month, why you want to give sadaqah on top of your zakat, why you want to pray your sunnah prayers, because none of us is going to be perfect. It's a foolish pursuit. But when you can acknowledge that I'm probably not doing something right, and these extra things also serve as a mechanism to fill some of those deficiencies. Does that make sense? When he says obligations are the basis and acts of supererogation are dependent upon them, it means you can't do what is sunnah in place of what is fard. You got to still try to do the fard, And it's a hard thing for people to hear, right? And Allah is the one that accepts, right? You can comment on mechanics. Somebody says, I'm going to pray, but I'm not going to make wudu. I just use the restroom. You can say, well, it's not valid. It's a prerequisite need, the wudu, for the ritual prayer, the salah. The validity of it is different from the acceptance. Whether you have wudu or not, the acceptance of it is between Allah and the person. I don't know as much as you don't know, right? So you just try your best. You want to try to do it the way that He said to do it and get it done in those ways, because that's the way that we were told to do the things. But you think about how many people flock to what is recommended, they're not getting the obligations done. Why is love important? Because some of us in this room, we're going to have family members who pass away that don't fulfill their obligations. May Allah grant them ease and entrance into Jannah without any judgment. You have to know, it's not incumbent upon you in most senses, but there's still things that can be done for individuals who did not fulfill their obligations. Different types of expiations if they pass from this world. Some of us will have family members who never fulfill their Hajj. You know why you got to get your Hajj done now when you have the means to get it done and you're not 70, 80 years old and you save up money to get it done? Because there's a good chance that somebody's going to pass away in your family that did not get their Hajj done before they left. So who's going to do it for them? And you can't do it for them if you haven't done it for yourself first. Do you understand? That's why love comes into the picture. You see what I mean? Does that make sense? You can apply this to other things. People didn't get their fast fulfilled. People didn't pray their salah. People have debts just as they would in terms of they took money from somebody. These are things that are owed to the divine. There's kafara for them in different ways. But fundamentally, the obligation becomes the base, and what is recommended is built upon that. You can't get up and pray just your 2 sunnahs of Fajr. You got to pray the fard prayers of Fajr. Does that make sense? Okay. Let's continue. The one who performs the obligations.
The one who performs the obligations avoids the prohibited things and does not add anything to this is better than him who performs acts of supererogation, but neglects of obligations. Beware, therefore, of neglecting any obligations while occupied with acts such as supererogations. For you would thereby sin, and by abandoning your obligations, your acts of supererogations will become unacceptable to God. An example of this is the man who occupies himself with acquiring a kind of knowledge which is for him supererogatory and neglects acquiring the kind of which for him is obligatory, either outwardly or inwardly. Another is the man who is able to but neglects working for a livelihood and busies himself with supererogatory devotions, leaving his children to beg from others. You can use these 2 examples to assess by analogy other similar situations.
Okay, so this paragraph again has certain principles in it, just so we can kind of get people talking again. If you can turn the person next to you, what are you taking away from this paragraph and some of what was preceding in the discussion? But what is it kind of giving you insight to principally? and where are you at right now just on the conversation on a whole. If you can talk to the persons next to you, and then we'll come back and discuss. Go ahead. Okay, so what are some of the things we're discussing? What are you taking away so far from the whole conversation, this paragraph? What is it bringing up for you? Who wants to start?
So I like when you mentioned about the Rumi and the veils that we put between us and God. It's something that we create, and we need to be aware enough, like just like be mindful of what is that, what did I put in between me and him, because he wants to get closer.
Can you talk a little louder? People can't hear you in the back.
So I was saying that I like the concept of that he mentioned about the Rumi when he mentioned there is veils between us and God, and these veils we like self-create these veils. So it's good to be mindful and to look for these veils. It's challenging to know exactly what you're creating that holds you back, that distracts you from whatever you should be, from improving your relationship with God. But this is a question that we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, and I would clarify in this, right? So what she's saying is that there are things that exist within us, and what I would add is that we're not always the ones that put those things in our hearts. Do you know what I mean? A lot of us have a lot of things going on inside of us that stem from our own socialization, our childhood, like difficult life events, traumatic experiences that happen even in adulthood. But it's not that I am necessarily the catalyst of everything that has abode in my heart, right? Like if we were talking every single day, I'm saying every single day, like, you're an idiot. And he hears this every single day. Do you know what I mean? If I'm in a place where as a child, I hear from an elder every single day, you're a mistake. I don't hear, like, I love you in a healthy way, but love is used as an excuse for mistreatment. Do you know? It creates all kinds of conundrums. Do you know what I mean? This is why the conversation can't be self-deprecating or one that is unkind to oneself. And this is why you also have to understand, like hadith, that tell us things like, a person might say a word, giving no consideration to what it was that they said, and that word can literally be what drags them to Jahannam. May Allah protect us from it. How? Like, think about the consequences of a word and what it then has as a domino effect. You speak in a moment of what you think is jest or indifference towards gossip that then yields very problematic kind of outputs. You have the capacity, right, to fulfill certain responsibilities. This is why this paragraph is so important, because as a text, it's telling you you live in reality. He's not saying go sit down and just engage in adhkar day in and day out, but a recognition that you are not fulfilling obligations is that you are accruing certain knowledges at the expense of gaining livelihood that you fully have capacity to gain, and because you are choosing not to, in order to pursue like sacred knowledge learning, then your kids are out there asking others to give to you something that you should be the provider of. Do you see what I mean? We're not the only ones that impact what's going on inside of us. It's hard. It's heavy. This is why you got to understand everybody's got crap going on in their lives. So don't add to it. You see somebody being a jerk, be that much kinder. You're in a place where you meet somebody that isn't treating you well, don't hold it inside. Find somebody that you can lean on. Be somebody who builds those types of relationships, supportiveness to the people around you, right? So you don't have to know what to do, right? That's not what it is. And if you run into a situation, you don't know what to do, you reach out to me. I don't know how to do everything, but we have a lot of people that come to this space. We talk about thousands of people. There's no shortage of people who know how to do certain things. You want to talk to a lawyer? I can get you a lawyer to talk to. I'm not a lawyer. You want to talk to somebody who can help you with financial planning? You need somebody to help you move this or do that or whatever else you need? Yeah, these are things. I could use a lot of help from people to help us build that out in a more structured way, to leverage people's talents and these kinds of things. But fundamentally here, you want to understand that the veils exist. It is your right to remove them. Not just a responsibility, your right. So that you can have contentment. So that those who did not treat you well, they don't continue to exert authority over you. And on the other end of it, how you treat people really does impact them. And it can create an influence on how they see themselves, how they see others, how they see the world, who they think God is. You don't want to stand in front of Allah and be in a place where He asks you, why did you let people feel like I was harsh from your treatment of them? Why weren't you there when they were looking for somebody to lean on? Do you get what I'm saying? And it goes back to loving yourself, because you can't take care of somebody else's heart if you're not taking care of your own heart. And when you're running on empty and you don't have a way to fill yourself up again, it's going to be really hard to give of yourself. Do you get what I mean? What else are we taking from this before we wrap up? This paragraph or the conversation on a whole? Yeah.
We talked about how prayer.
Every time you've talked, you've done this with your hand.
No, I'm just doing. We talked about how we talk to ourselves when it comes to prayer. The language we use. Sometimes we say, "I have to." Oh my God, I have to pray. Oh my God, it's time for prayer. Or I just prayed. I have to pray again. I think like a mind shift where we tell ourselves, "I get to pray." Can change a lot how we see prayer, or the fact that you have the physical ability, the mental capacity to move, to be able to do it. I think just a little bit of shifts here and there can make it easy to show up for the opposition.
Yeah, when I played sports in high school, I played sports with guys that played D1. We had people that went and played professional in different places. They were good. And some of them were just kind of innate athletic ability. And then when they got to college, they got like rocked, but they got good coaches that helped them. And some of them were serious from the onset. But some would do like little things. They would take stairs, for examples, instead of elevators. Did it make the difference in them being able to dunk a basketball versus not dunk a basketball? No, but then you get to say that I'm the type of person that takes the stairs. Do you get what I mean? Like, I'm the type of person that wakes up for Fajr. What does that person look like? Why can't that be you? And that self-talk becomes really important. The things that weigh us down that are heavy have to be dealt with, because it's not sometimes out of a lack of desire, but we're not acknowledging what is kind of roping us in, so to speak. And it's hard, right? Like last week when I went to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, every single day, as much as I tried not to go to bed at 1 a.m., I still was going to bed at 1 a.m. I flew to Toronto on Friday after Jummah. I ran out of Jummah to get to the airport to catch a flight that was delayed for 4 hours. And then there was some kind of storm. It didn't even make any sense. They said, we're going to take a long way because the air is access is closed over Cleveland. I said, why are you flying over Cleveland to go to Toronto? It's geographically, what does this mean? Right? And then I didn't land in Toronto. I was supposed to land at 8 o'clock. And I was like, thank God I'm going to land at 8 o'clock. I'm going to go to the hotel, and I'm going to pray Maghrib and Isha together, and then I'm going to go to sleep till Fajr time. I didn't get into my hotel till 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was like, man, this is whatever, But understanding that on those days where I'm typically going to bed by 10:30, and then I wake up at 5, I got up and prayed Fajr, and I couldn't do anything else. I had to go back to sleep. Because if I'm only sleeping 3 hours a night, and then I try to stay up for the next like 14, 16, my day just changed substantially. It's very different if you sleep from 10 till 5 and then stay up the whole day versus if you sleep from 1 till 5 or 1 till 4:30 and stay up the whole day, right? So you got to be kind to yourself. This is just me learning about myself. I don't have to hate on myself, but I went back to sleep because I needed the sleep to get through the rest of the day. How you respond to the day is going to be structurally what makes sense for you. But in none of that can you miss the obligation. Do you get what I mean? You got to do it. That has to be the goal. What Imam Al-Haddad is saying here, that the one who just performs obligations and avoids prohibitions, that is better to do than somebody who performs some obligations and some recommended acts, but then neglects certain obligations. Does that make sense? So you want to be on top of like the fara'id. You want to start to work and chip away at it. If you aren't getting it done, you got to be strategic with it, right? To go from 0 to 60 is not an easy thing to do. So if you're doing 1 a day, then great. Try to start doing 2 a day, and then start doing 3 a day, and then 4, and then 5. You start doing 5, add in like the sunnahs to them, right? Allow for yourself to be kind of compensating for the ones that you're missing. If you're missing some, then make them up before the next ones start. Does that make sense? Beware, therefore, of neglecting any obligations while occupied with acts that are supererogatory, for you thereby sin. And by abandoning your obligations, your acts of supererogation will become unacceptable to God. An example of this is a man who occupies himself with acquiring a kind of knowledge which is for him supererogatory and neglects acquiring the kind which is for him obligatory, either outwardly or inwardly. This is an important thing to understand also. It's not just about what is external. If you are learning things that are recommended, but they are rooted only in what is outward, and you haven't taken time to learn how to take care of your inside at a base level, which is one of the boxes of obligatory knowledge, a fundamental understanding of how to take care of your heart, then you have to prioritize that. Not just as something you rotely memorize, but as something then you do something with that information. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? So if I know that I'm angry, how do I know how to deal with anger? When I'm sad, when I'm anxious, when I have grief. If my heart is giving me certain insights, the presence of certain maladies, avarice, jealousy, envy, may Allah protect us from these things. Allah has built us in such a way where we can see from our body, our mind, our heart, our spirit, when certain things are kind of thrown off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.